So we come to week 3, and our subject tonight is there life after death? There are 2 fundamental pillars of Christian belief, the cross and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Last week we considered the cross and its purpose. This week we'll consider the evidence for the resurrection and the implications of both the cross and the resurrection for us. So let's look for a few moments at the evidence for the resurrection. This starts with the question, did Jesus really die? Some have suggested that he merely went into a faint or a coma from which he awoke in the tomb. However, the centurion, whose job it was to make sure a crucified victim had died, was so convinced of this that he didn't break Jesus' legs as he did with the other prisoners, such that they would die from suffocation, but instead he thrust a spear into Jesus' side. The outflow was blood and fluid, which only happens after someone is dead and comes from around the heart, which was pierced by the spear. Joseph of Arimathea washed and wrapped Jesus' body before putting it in the tomb. With such intimate contact, he would certainly have known if Jesus had still been alive. In any event, if Jesus had just woken up after what he had been through, he had the strength to roll a 2-ton stone away from the entrance to the tomb and overcome the guards and make an escape? Unlikely. Perhaps somebody robbed the body. Well, the tomb was sealed and it was guarded. Moreover, his disciples were in despair at his loss and would not have had the energy or the inclination to do so. And in any event, what would be gained by taking a corpse? Did the disciples just go to the wrong tomb? Hardly. Was it a mass hallucination? But it affected hundreds of people at the same time, so that's not likely. Were the events all just some kind of coincidence? Well, now we're into the realms of fantasy. Many saw Jesus at different times. We also have to consider, why would the disciples die for a lie? All of them died a martyr's death, except perhaps John. Even when given the chance to recant, to save themselves, none of them did. The only reasonable explanation for that is that they had encountered the risen Christ. So what transformed these men? After the crucifixion, they were demoralized. Peter had already denied that he knew Jesus, and all of them had fled. 50 days after the cross, they were testifying to the resurrection in the temple before those who'd put Jesus to death. We're told in Acts that they went on to turn the world upside down. The church, which now incorporates 1/3 of the world's population, is their legacy. Something definitely happened to transform those men from Christ deniers to proclaimers of the gospel, even in threat of their lives. Coming to the modern day, Sir Mark Tully is a widely respected author and commentator who worked for the BBC for 30 years, holding the post of Chief of Bureau BBC in Delhi for 20 years. He was born in India and at one time trained even to become a priest in the Church of England. He didn't pursue that career, however, and instead became a journalist. And this is what he once wrote. That man, Jesus, was probably a failure in his own time. He taught in strange riddles. He didn't convince his fellow Jews, and he didn't overthrow Rome. From that failure, I have come to what for me is the hardest conclusion of all. That the hardest, apparently least historical article of Christian faith, the resurrection, must have happened. If there had been no miracle after Jesus' death, there would be no grounds for faith in a failed life. So no resurrection, no church. That was Sir Mark Tully's conclusion. The Apostle Paul puts it even more emphatically in the book of Corinthians, where he says, if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain. Now, in an age where everything goes, and no one wants to be too distinct about anything, it does not sit easily with some to be so emphatic. I would not be truthful, however, if I fudged this point. Jesus knew he was going to die. He told his disciples this would happen. And he knew he would be raised again from the dead within 3 days. He had raised others from the dead himself, but it was another thing altogether to predict it for oneself. So, how does the death of Jesus on the cross and his resurrection work for us? Let's consider a relatively modern tale, that of Les Miserables, a story told originally in 1863 by Victor Hugo and since the subject of a hugely successful musical and film adaptation. The novel examines the nature of law and grace and offers a commentary on the social structures of France at the time. In the story, Jean Valjean is on the run, having been imprisoned doing hard labour for stealing bread. He's taken in by a priest who feeds him and gives him shelter. During the night, he steals the priest's silver and makes off into the night. He is caught and brought back to the priest, who, instead of confirming the crime, says he should have taken more, since it had all been given to him. The result of the priest's gracious act is that Jean Valjean repents and gives his life over to doing good works. Now, there is a distinction in life between mercy, where we do not receive the punishment we deserve, and grace, where we receive a blessing that we have not earned. So this story is both mercy and grace. Jean Valjean did not get what he deserved, but rather received a benefit to which he was not entitled. In the same way, we deserve punishment for all that we have done. However, God chose to punish Jesus in our place on the cross. We could never be good enough on our own, but we don't have to be. We just have to accept what he has done on our behalf. Our response to grace, like that of Valjean, should then be to live in the good of what we have received and seek to help others, not to earn our way into God's favour, but as an act of thanks for receiving his favour. In rising from the dead, Jesus proved, because he was sinless and therefore did not deserve to die, death could not hold him. He has defeated Satan, of whom we shall learn more in the coming weeks. He has removed the curse of death. This means that although we shall all physically die, for those who have put their trust in him, we can look forward to the promise of resurrection one day that is guaranteed by his own resurrection. Our destiny is not to sit in heaven plucking on harps, as is often portrayed in cartoons. Our destiny is to rise again from the dead and to live with him in the world which he will restore back to what he always intended it to be. The cross makes possible a relationship with the living God. The resurrection gives us hope, both for the present and the future.